The evening started like any other in the small city diner, but Mia could feel something different in the air. The moment she walked through the door, she saw customers already waiting in a line that reached outside. The place was loud, busy, and full of hungry people shouting for menus and drinks. Mia tied her apron, pushed back her hair, and took a deep breath. She had worked here for 2 years, but today felt heavier than usual. Maybe it was because she hadn't slept well, or maybe it was because her manager, Mr. Collins, was already yelling at the kitchen staff even before she reached the counter. Either way, she braced herself for a long and tiring shift. Mia moved quickly between tables, smiling even when her legs hurt and her back felt stiff. She always believed that customers deserved kindness no matter how tired she was. She placed napkins, wrote orders, refilled drinks, and said thank you and enjoy your meal so many times she lost count. But deep inside, she wished she had a better job, one where people treated her with respect, where she didn't have to hide her stress behind a forced smile. Still, she needed the money, especially after her mother became sick last year. So she kept working, pushing her worries aside, and focusing on staying calm even as chaos grew around her. The bell above the door chimed again, but this time Mia noticed something strange. A tall man in a big black hoodie walked in quietly. He kept his head down and tried not to draw attention. The hood covered most of his face, but Mia still felt like she had seen him somewhere before. She couldn't place it yet, but there was something about him, his height, his build, the way he moved, that made her curious. But before she could think more, her manager snapped at her from across the room, telling her to stop staring and serve table 9 right away. Mia nodded and hurried over, pushing aside her thoughts. Table 9 complained about cold water, table 12 wanted extra bread, table 5 said their soup tasted funny, and the kitchen kept shouting that they were running out of ingredients. The whole place felt like it was falling apart, and Mr. Collins made everything worse by blaming the staff for problems he created himself. Mia tried to stay positive, but the pressure was heavy. She could feel her heart beating faster as she rushed from one table to another, trying to keep everyone satisfied. Meanwhile, the man in the hoodie quietly took a seat in a corner booth. He didn't wave for attention or complain. He just sat there calmly waiting. Mia noticed him again when she passed by with a tray of drinks. Something about him felt familiar, but she still couldn't figure it out. Finally, she approached him with a gentle smile and asked if he would like to order. He lifted his head just slightly, revealing a face she instantly recognized. It was Big Shaq. She almost dropped her pen. She had seen him on TV, on billboards and videos. Everyone knew him. But he motioned for her to stay quiet, and she understood immediately that he didn't want attention. He spoke politely, unlike many other famous people Mia had seen online. He asked for something simple, a burger, fries, and a soda. His voice was calm and friendly, and Mia felt comfortable talking to him. She nodded and promised to bring his order soon. But right when she turned around, Mr. Collins stormed toward her. He grabbed her arm and demanded to know why she was serving that customer, when he had told her to prioritize the tables who looked like they would leave big tips. Mia tried to explain that everyone deserved equal service, but he cut her off harshly. Mr. Collins leaned close and whispered angrily that the man in the hoodie looked broke, and was probably wasting her time. Mia felt her stomach twist. She knew he was judging the man unfairly, and she hated that kind of behavior. She tried to calmly tell him that she was just doing her job, but the manager was already furious. He shouted that she needed to follow his orders or face consequences. The customers nearby looked uncomfortable, but no one dared to interfere. Mia stood there frozen for a moment, torn between obeying her manager and doing what she believed was right. She glanced back at Big Shaq, who watched the argument quietly, his face unreadable. Mia took a deep breath, gathered her courage, and said she would still serve him because he was a customer like everyone else. It was a small act, but it felt like the bravest thing she had done in weeks. Her manager's face turned red with anger. He warned her that she was making a big mistake. But Mia didn't back down. She walked toward the kitchen to place the order, her hands shaking slightly. She felt scared but also strangely proud. She knew kindness mattered even when it was difficult. She didn't know it yet, but this single moment would change her life in ways she never imagined. That evening, in the middle of the loud restaurant, surrounded by anger, pressure, and noise, Mia made a small choice that would lead to the most shocking twist of her life. A twist waiting just one day away. The moment Mia stepped into the kitchen with the order slip in her hand, she could already hear Mr. Collins shouting behind her. His voice was loud enough to shake the walls, and several cooks exchanged worried looks. Everyone in the diner knew that when the manager got angry, someone always suffered. But right now, Mia tried to keep her hands steady as she placed Big Shaq's order on the counter. She didn't want to show fear, even though her heart pounded against her ribs like a drum. The head cook, Leo, glanced at the paper and then at Mia. He whispered that she should be careful because the manager looked ready to explode. Mia forced a small smile and told him she would be fine, even though she didn't believe her own words. Deep down, she felt a storm coming and she had no idea how big it would be. She only knew that she couldn't ignore a customer just because her manager thought he didn't look rich enough. Her parents had raised her better than that, and her mother always told her to help others no matter what. When she stepped out of the kitchen with a tray of drinks for another table, she saw Mr. Collins standing in the middle of the diner with his arms crossed. He was staring straight at her, his eyes full of anger. His face was so red it looked like it might burst. Mia took a slow breath, hoping he would calm down, but the moment she approached him, he started yelling loudly enough for every customer to hear. He accused her of disrespecting him, ignoring his orders, and wasting time on people who didn't matter. His voice echoed through the diner and people turned their heads, watching the drama unfold. Mia felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She hated when attention was on her, especially negative attention. She tried to explain softly that she was only doing her job, but he wouldn't listen. No matter what she said, he kept raising his voice. He pointed at the tall man in the hoodie sitting quietly in the corner. He announced to the entire diner that Mia had chosen to serve that nobody, instead of focusing on valuable customers. Mia felt a sharp sting in her chest. She knew he was wrong and she hated that he was insulting someone he didn't even know. At that moment, Big Shaq lifted his head a little, just enough to see the situation clearly. He didn't say anything but his eyes followed every movement, filled with calm and deep understanding. He wasn't angry. He wasn't frustrated. He just watched quietly as if he already knew something Mia didn't. Mia felt comforted when she saw the kindness in his eyes, but she also felt scared because the manager's anger kept rising. The situation grew worse when a customer from another table complained loudly about slow service. Mr. Collins immediately blamed Mia, even though she had been working non-stop. He shouted that she was lazy, careless, and unprofessional. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She stood straight, refusing to look away even though her whole body trembled. She had never been treated this cruelly in public before, and she couldn't understand why doing something kind had turned into such a disaster so quickly. Then, without warning, Mr. Collins stepped closer and told her something she never expected to hear. He said she was fired. He didn't give her a chance to defend herself. He didn't give her time to explain. He simply raised his voice and declared that she was done, effective immediately. The diner fell silent. Even children stopped talking. Everyone stared at Mia, shocked. Plates stopped clinking, forks froze mid-air, and the entire restaurant felt heavy with disbelief. Mia felt her heart break inside her chest. She needed this job. Her mother depended on her income for medicine and bills. Losing it meant losing security, losing food, losing sleep. Everything she had been fighting for suddenly slipped out of her hands in a single moment. She whispered that she didn't deserve this, but the manager waved his hand and ordered her to leave the diner right away. His voice was cold and final. Just as Mia turned to walk away, Big Shaq stood up. The chair behind him scraped loudly against the floor, making every head turn toward him. He removed his hoodie, revealing his face fully for the first time. Gasps filled the room. The customers recognized him immediately. Mr. Collins went pale. It was obvious that he realized he had just fired a waitress for serving a global superstar. Shaq walked toward Mia calmly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. He looked down at her and said in a deep, warm voice that she didn't deserve any of this. He spoke with kindness, not anger. Then he turned toward the manager. His expression changed. His eyes were sharp, serious, and filled with disappointment. He told Mr. Collins that judging people by their appearance was the worst behavior any leader could show. The entire diner listened carefully, mesmerized by Shaq's calm authority, but even Shaq's words didn't save her job. Mr. Collins muttered that it was too late and that she was already fired. He turned away, refusing to admit he had made a mistake. Mia felt her last hope disappear, and she slowly walked toward the door, her head down, tears finally escaping her eyes. She didn't want anyone to see her cry, but she couldn't stop it anymore. Shaq called out to her, but she couldn't respond. She pushed open the door and stepped outside into the cold night, feeling like her whole world had fallen apart in just a few minutes. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The next 24 hours would bring a storm that would shake her city, and change her life forever. Mia stepped out of the diner and felt the cold night air hit her face, but but it wasn't as cold as the emptiness forming in her chest. The bright restaurant lights behind her blurred as tears filled her eyes. She kept walking, not sure where she was going, only knowing she needed to get away from the voices, the stares, and the humiliation. The sound of her manager's shouts still echoed in her mind, each word cutting deeper than the one before. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold herself together as she moved down the sidewalk. Cars passed by, their headlights flickering across her face, but she didn't look up. Her steps were slow and heavy. She felt like she was dragging all her problems behind her like a chain. Every time she blinked, her tears returned. She wiped them away quickly, hoping no one on the street noticed. But even if they did, she didn't have the energy to care anymore. All she could think about was how she had just lost the one job that helped keep her mother's medicine paid for. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. She didn't want to talk to anyone, not even friends who might ask if she was okay. She wasn't okay. Not today. She walked past a bakery window where the smell of fresh bread drifted into the street. Normally that smell comforted her. It reminded her of childhood mornings with her mother. But tonight, even that warm scent couldn't touch the ache inside her chest. She felt small, invisible, and defeated. As she reached a quiet intersection, she finally slowed down and leaned against a street lamp. Her shoulders shook as she cried silently. She tried to breathe steady, but every breath came out shaky and sharp. She whispered to herself that she didn't do anything wrong. She helped a customer, she treated someone with kindness, and yet she still lost her job. She didn't understand why good actions always came with pain. It felt unfair, like the world punished gentle people more than anyone else. After a few minutes, she forced herself to keep moving. Home wasn't far, but the walk felt longer than ever. The streets grew quieter as she entered her neighborhood, a small, worn-down block with old houses and dim porch lights. Her own house was small but warm inside, with curtains her mother had sewn years ago. When she reached the front step, she hesitated. She couldn't let her mother see her like this. She didn't want to worry her. She wiped her face again, took a deep breath, and practiced a small fake smile before opening the door. Her mother, Mrs. Rivera, was sitting on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked tired but peaceful. When she saw Mia, she smiled sweetly and asked how her day went. Mia's heart tightened painfully. She opened her mouth to speak, but the lie she had prepared suddenly felt too heavy. She didn't want to bring sadness into the house, not when her mother was already fighting illness every day. So she simply said she was tired and needed rest. Her mother nodded gently, not guessing the storm behind her daughter's eyes. Mia went to her room and closed the door quietly. The small space felt like a sanctuary, a bed with old blankets, a tiny lamp, and walls decorated with little notes her mother used to leave her every morning. She sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long, shaky breath. Her whole body felt weak. She picked up her phone and saw missed calls from her coworker Leo. She ignored them for now. She couldn't retell the story without breaking down again. She placed her phone on the bed and stared up at the ceiling. Her thoughts twisted together, fear, sadness, anger, and confusion. She had no idea how she would pay next month's bills. She had no idea how long she would be unemployed. She didn't even know how she would explain everything to her mother without causing stress. Everything felt uncertain, and the uncertainty crushed her slowly. But under all that pain, a tiny spark of hope flickered. She remembered Big Shaq's gentle voice. The way he defended her. The way he looked at her with respect, not pity. She replayed his words in her mind. She didn't know why, but his voice gave her a strange sense of comfort. Maybe it was because he didn't treat her like someone weak. Maybe it was because he saw what really happened. Or maybe it was because, for the first time that night, someone stood up for her. Mia lay down on her bed and closed her eyes, but sleep refused to come. She tossed and turned for hours, listening to the soft ticking of the old wall clock. She felt stuck between fear of tomorrow and the memory of what happened today. Finally, she sat up and looked out the window. The night sky was dark and quiet. She whispered to herself that things would somehow get better. She didn't know how, but she needed to believe something good was still waiting for her. Across town, at that exact moment, Big Shaq was sitting in his hotel room with his phone in his hand. The incident at the diner replayed in his mind too. He couldn't forget the way Mia stood up for him. He couldn't forget how she was punished for her kindness. He stared at the screen, thinking, planning, and deciding something that would change Mia's life forever. But Mia, sitting alone in the darkness of her room, didn't know any of this. All she knew was that tonight was one of the hardest nights of her life. She didn't realize that tomorrow would bring a shock so powerful, so unexpected, that it would wipe away every tear she cried today and replace her fear with a miracle she never imagined. The next morning, the diner opened at its usual time, but something felt different the moment the doors unlocked. The staff moved nervously, whispering to each other. Even the cooks in the back worked more quietly than usual. It was as if everyone sensed a storm hanging over the building, waiting to break. Mr. Collins walked around with his chest puffed out, pretending everything was normal, but his eyes darted around anxiously. He had barely slept the night before. Something about the way the tall man in the hoodie looked at him made him uneasy. He didn't know the full truth yet. He didn't know that the man he insulted and ignored was one of the most recognizable figures in the world. Someone with millions of fans, global influence, and a reputation for kindness. He didn't know that Big Shaq had not forgotten what happened. And he had no idea that today would be the day his arrogance finally caught up with him. Across town, Mia was still asleep, exhausted from crying and stress. She didn't know anything about the chaos building at the diner. She didn't know that something big was already in motion. She was curled under her blanket, trying to escape her worries for a few more minutes. Her mother peeked into her room and smiled sadly, thinking her daughter was just tired from work. She whispered a small prayer for her, hoping the day would be gentle on her child. Meanwhile, at the diner, customers started entering. The morning crowd was calm, office workers, students, and a few elderly regulars. The staff tried their best to act normal, but tension hung in the air like a shadow. Every time the door opened, they flinched a little. No one expected what would happen next. Then, around 9:15 a.m., the door opened again, but this time, someone very familiar stepped inside. Big Shaq walked in. Not in a hoodie. Not hiding his face. Not quietly slipping into a corner. He walked in confidently, wearing a simple jacket, his face completely visible. His height alone made everyone turn their heads. Customers froze mid-bite. A waitress dropped a spoon. The manager's eyes went wide like he had just seen a ghost. Gasps traveled across the room as people whispered, "Is that who I think it is? Wait, Big Shaq. Oh my God, that's really him." Mr. Collins swallowed hard. His throat felt dry. He took a step forward and forced a shaky smile. "Sir, welcome. Welcome back." But Shaq didn't smile. He didn't even look impressed. He simply stared at Mr. Collins with the kind of look that made the manager shrink inside his own skin. A look that said he remembered everything. Every insult. Every unfair order. Every moment of disrespect. The entire diner went silent as Big Shaq stepped closer. His voice was calm but powerful. He said he returned because something important needed to be addressed. The way he spoke made everyone lean in listening. He told the staff, the customers, and the manager that last night, a kind-hearted waitress was fired for doing something simple, showing respect. Many customers looked confused. Some murmured. Everyone wanted to know more. Mr. Collins tried to laugh awkwardly, claiming it was a misunderstanding. But Shaq didn't let him finish. He calmly explained that the waitress didn't know who he was. She helped him simply because it was the right thing to do. He described the way she defended him even when ordered not to. He talked about how she endured humiliation for standing by her values. He praised her character, her kindness, and her strength. The customers listened, shocked. Suddenly, people in the diner began looking at each other with disgust. Disgust toward the manager. Some whispered that Mia didn't deserve that treatment. Others shook their heads, remembering moments when he had mistreated staff in the past. The atmosphere shifted. In an instant, Mr. Collins lost all control of the room. His power melted away under the weight of truth. Shaq then pulled out his phone and showed something. A social media post he wrote late last night. It described what happened. It didn't mention the diner's name, but people recognized it anyway. Already, the post had thousands of comments, thousands of shares, and thousands of people demanding justice for the fired waitress. Some customers in the diner checked their phones and gasped. They saw the same post trending on their feeds. They saw their own city mentioned. Their own diner. Their own manager being discussed by strangers worldwide. One customer stood up and said loudly that he would never return to a place that treated workers like that. Another agreed. Someone took a picture of Shaq in the diner and posted it instantly. Within seconds, more people online knew exactly where he was. The manager's hands began to shake. His face turned pale. He felt the entire room slipping away from him. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. He tried to defend himself, but no one wanted to hear him anymore. Big Shaq walked past him without another word and headed toward the exit. But before leaving, he turned to the room and said that kindness should always be honored, not punished. A wave of applause filled the diner. Staff and customers alike clapped, not for Shaq but for Mia. For the girl who lost everything because she chose kindness. Mr. Collins stood frozen, feeling his world collapse. He had no idea that this was only the first blow. The real storm was about to start. Outside the diner, cameras were already gathering. Reporters had arrived. News vans were parking. People were rushing toward the entrance, eager to see why Big Shaq was there. And inside, the manager realized something terrible. He wasn't losing just a worker today. He was about to lose everything. Chaos began forming outside the diner like a gathering storm. Reporters hurried across the sidewalk with cameras and microphones, pushing toward the entrance. Curious people stopped their cars, parked on the side of the road, and walked closer to see what was going on. Some even went live on social media, recording the scene and shouting that Big Shaq had just exposed the diner for mistreating a kind-hearted waitress. Within minutes, a crowd formed, and the once quiet street turned into a buzzing hive of whispers, questions, and flashing cameras. Inside, the staff watched with stunned faces. No one had ever seen the diner so crowded from the outside. The cooks peeked through the kitchen window. The waiters stood frozen with trays in their hands. Even customers forgot their meals as they stared out the window at the growing crowd. Everyone understood what this meant. The diner had become the center of a massive scandal. And the manager, Mr. Collins, stood in the middle of it like a man drowning in rising water. He tried to regain control. He clapped his hands loudly and shouted at the employees to get back to work. But his voice sounded weak, shaky, and desperate. No one moved. People no longer respected him. They were tired of his bullying, his unfair rules, and his arrogant behavior. One of the oldest waitresses, Linda, crossed her arms and told him she wasn't going to serve anyone until he apologized to Mia. Others nodded quietly. The unity surprised him. He was used to barking orders and having people obey instantly, but today everything felt different. Today the truth had broken his power. The customers at the tables also spoke up. One man stood up and said loudly that he wanted the bill so he could leave. "I'm not supporting a place that fires someone for being decent," he said. A woman at another table added, "Your waitress showed more professionalism than you ever did." Their voices echoed across the room, cutting into Mr. Collins like knives. He kept trying to defend himself, but every attempt made him sound guiltier. Some customers recorded him with their phones, capturing every awkward excuse and angry outburst. Then something happened that he never expected. One of the cooks stepped out of the kitchen and placed his apron on the counter. Leo looked at the manager with calm eyes and announced he was quitting. "I'm done working for someone who doesn't respect people," he said. His voice was simple but powerful. Another waiter followed, then another. One by one, several employees placed their aprons or name tags on the counter. In only a few minutes, the diner lost half its staff. The customers clapped in support and someone shouted, "Justice for Mia." Outside, news reporters were already announcing the developing story. One reporter spoke into her microphone and said, "A well-known superstar experienced discrimination at this local diner last night, and the employee who stood up for him was fired. Crowds are gathering to demand accountability." As she spoke, people watching the live broadcast online began posting comments, some furious, some shocked, some emotional. The diner's reputation was collapsing right in front of everyone's eyes. Meanwhile, inside her small bedroom across town, Mia slowly woke up. She stretched, rubbed her eyes, and sat on the edge of her bed with a heavy sigh. Her face felt swollen from crying the night before. She checked her phone with dread, worried about bills, worried about work, worried about everything. She saw dozens of missed calls and messages. She frowned in confusion. Why were so many people trying to contact her so early in the morning? She didn't know that while she slept, her name had started trending online. Her friend Leo had sent messages saying, "Turn on the TV. You need to see this. It's about you." But before Mia could open any messages, her mother called from the living room with a shaky voice. "Mia," she said, "come see this, quickly." Mia rushed out of her room, still half asleep, and found her mother pointing at the television. On the screen, a news channel showed live footage of crowds outside the diner. The headline on the screen read, "Superstar defends fired waitress, city demands justice." Mia's heart skipped a beat. Her knees weakened. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. She watched the screen closer, barely breathing. The reporter repeated her story. They mentioned her name. They explained what Big Shaq said. They talked about how customers praised her kindness. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She felt overwhelmed, terrified, confused, and touched all at once. Her mother put an arm around her, both of them speechless as the story unfolded. Back at the diner, the situation got even worse for the manager. The health inspector arrived after seeing the viral post. He walked straight inside, announced his presence, and asked to speak with the owner. Mr. Collins tried to explain that it was all a misunderstanding, but the inspector had already received over 200 complaints online. He began inspecting the diner immediately. Within minutes, he found several violations the manager had been ignoring for months. Customers gasped as the inspector wrote everything down, shaking his head in disappointment. Soon after, the owner of the diner arrived, a tall, quiet man who rarely visited. He had seen the viral post too. His face was filled with disappointment and anger. He demanded an explanation from Mr. Collins. The manager tried to talk his way out, but the owner silenced him with a stern look. Customers and employees watched as the owner finally said something Mr. Collins thought he would never hear. "You're fired." The staff applauded. Some customers cheered. Mr. Collins stood there frozen, unable to believe that the job he abused for years was gone in a single moment. The owner apologized to the customers and promised to make things right. But one question remained on everyone's mind. Where was Mia now? And as the crowd outside grew larger, as cameras focused on the diner, as the city buzzed with curiosity, they had no idea that Big Shaq was already planning the next step. And his next step was going straight to Mia's door. Mia's heart stopped for a moment when she heard the voice coming from behind the crowd. It wasn't loud, but it carried a sharpness that cut through the noise around her like a blade. People stepped aside one by one, creating a path. And there, walking fast, his face pale and desperate, was Mr. Collins, her former manager. The same man who had fired her in front of everyone. The same man who yelled at her, embarrassed her, and told her she didn't matter. Now he stood trembling, surrounded by cameras and reporters who recorded his every step. Mia instinctively stepped back. Her hands curled into fists. Fear mixed with anger surged through her, but before she could say anything, Big Shaq moved smoothly in front of her, blocking her from Mr. Collins' reach. His expression changed. His calm, protective eyes hardened instantly. Even the reporters went silent, sensing something unpredictable was about to happen. Mr. Collins raised his hands slightly as if he were surrendering. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Mia, I need to talk to you." He tried to sound gentle, but guilt made his voice tremble. He looked exhausted, his hair messy, his clothes wrinkled, and his confidence completely gone. He had aged 10 years overnight. The scandal had destroyed him, and he knew it. Shaq stepped forward. "She doesn't owe you anything," he said firmly. "Stay back." The reporters held their breath. A few phones shook as people tried to record the moment without dropping them. Mr. Collins swallowed hard. He wasn't here to fight. He wasn't here to argue. He was here because his entire world had collapsed in less than a day, and Mia was the only one who could hear the apology he never thought he'd need to give. He looked at her with watery eyes and said, "I'm sorry." The words felt strange, almost unreal, coming from him. Mia stared in confusion. She never expected an apology from him, not after the way he mistreated her for months. She didn't respond. She waited silently, her face unreadable. And that silence forced Mr. Collins to keep talking. "I was wrong," he said, breathing shakily. "I should never have fired you. I should never have treated you the way I did. I let my stress and ego control me. And now," he looked down as his voice broke, "I've lost everything." People in the crowd murmured. Some even felt pity. But Mia didn't move. She stood frozen, replaying the humiliation he caused her. The long nights she cried. The fear she carried home. The way he belittled her in front of strangers. An apology couldn't erase that pain. Shaq turned his head slightly toward Mia. "You don't have to forgive him," he said softly. "You don't owe him anything." Mia knew that. She didn't owe him forgiveness and she didn't owe him comfort. But she also wasn't built to hold hatred. Her mother raised her to be gentle, and deep inside her, there was still a quiet heart that didn't want revenge. She took a slow breath and stepped forward just enough to see him clearly. "I appreciate your apology," she whispered, her voice shaking. "But it doesn't change what happened." Mr. Collins nodded quickly, wiping tears with the back of his hand. I know. But I just wanted you to hear it from me. I needed you to know I regret it." He stood there for a moment, looking small and defeated. Then he turned away, walking through the crowd as reporters chased after him with questions. Cameras flashed. People whispered. Some shook their heads at him. Some felt sorry. But everyone understood one thing. This was a man facing the consequences of his cruelty. Once the manager disappeared around the corner, Shaq turned back to Mia. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded slowly, even though her emotions were tangled inside her. She felt relief, confusion, sadness, and a strange hollow feeling she didn't know how to name. But she also felt stronger than she ever had before. She had faced her past without breaking. Reporters stepped closer, eager for statements. Microphones pointed toward her. Cameras zoomed in on her face. Some asked about Shaq. Some asked about the diner. Some asked about her future. Mia's breath grew unsteady. She wasn't used to attention. She wasn't ready for a crowd. She felt her chest tighten, until Shaq placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, grounding her again. He whispered, "You don't have to answer anything right now. Come with me." He guided her away from the reporters toward the street corner where his SUV waited. The crowd parted respectfully, letting them pass. Some people applauded quietly as she walked by. Others reached out to give her encouraging smiles. One woman said, "We're proud of you." Another whispered, "You deserve good things." As they reached the car, Mia finally asked the question that had been building in her mind. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Shaq opened the door and leaned against the frame, his voice warm and sincere. "Because kindness matters. And because you showed it when no one else did. You reminded me of something important. Good people deserve good chances." She stared at him, speechless. Her eyes filled with tears, not from sadness but from the strange, overwhelming feeling of being seen, appreciated, and valued for the first time in a long time. Then Shaq said something that made her heart stop for a second. "And Mia, what I'm about to show you next might change your future forever." She froze. "What do you mean?" Shaq gave her a small smile, full of mystery and warmth. "Get in. You'll see." Mia slowly stepped into the SUV, her pulse racing, her mind spinning. The door closed gently behind her. And in that moment she had no idea that the next destination would bring the biggest shock of her entire life. Mia sat quietly in the back seat of the SUV as it pulled away from her neighborhood. Her fingers trembled against her lap, and she kept glancing at Big Shaq, who sat beside her, calm and steady like nothing in the world could shake him. She didn't know where they were going. She didn't know why he looked so sure, so confident, as if he already knew something life-changing was waiting for her. She wanted to ask, but her voice refused to come out. All she could hear was her own heartbeat thumping in her ears. Shaq noticed her nervousness and gave her a comforting smile. "You're safe," he said softly. "Trust me." Mia nodded gently, but her stomach still felt tight. She stared out the window as the city passed by. Busy streets, honking cars, people walking with coffees, workers rushing to offices. It all looked normal. Like an ordinary day. But Mia's life had become anything but ordinary. Everything had happened so fast that it barely felt real anymore. After several minutes, the car slowed down in front of a tall glass building. The entrance was lined with security guards and cameras. Mia's eyes widened. She had seen this place before, on TV, in magazines, in online videos. It was one of the most luxurious business towers in the city. She turned to Shaq in shock, unable to speak. He simply smiled and said, "Come on. We're here." The guards immediately stepped aside when they saw Shaq. Some greeted him with respect, others with surprise. Shaq placed a gentle hand behind Mia's back to guide her forward. She felt small walking into the massive lobby with marble floors, golden lights, and people dressed in expensive suits. Everyone turned their heads as the two walked in, but Shaq didn't let go of her. He kept her close, as if protecting her from the weight of a world she had never stepped into before. They entered the elevator. The walls were mirrors, and Mia saw her own reflection, tired eyes, messy hair, and a worn-out jacket. She felt out of place. She whispered, "I don't belong here." Shaq shook his head. "Yes, you do. You belong wherever kindness belongs. And that's everywhere." Something warm filled her chest at those words, and for the first time that day she allowed herself to breathe normally. The elevator doors opened at the top floor, an office level with huge windows overlooking the entire city. The sunlight flooded the room, making the space look almost unreal. Mia's jaw dropped. "Where are we?" she whispered. Shaq laughed softly. "A friend's office. Someone who wanted to meet you." Before she could ask who, a tall woman with a sharp suit and kind smile stepped forward. She reached out her hand toward Mia. "You must be the brave waitress everyone is talking about," she said warmly. "I'm Claire. I manage one of the biggest restaurant groups in the city." Mia blinked in confusion. She shook the woman's hand nervously. Claire continued, "Shaq called me last night. He told me what happened. And I knew immediately that I needed to meet you." Mia had no idea what was happening. She looked at Shaq in shock. He nodded, encouraging her to listen. Claire walked to her desk and picked up a folder. She turned back toward Mia with an excited smile. We've been opening a new high-end restaurant downtown, she explained. But we've struggled to find staff who have real heart. People who treat customers with warmth, not just trainable service. She opened the folder and held it out for Mia to see. Inside were documents, photos, and plans of a beautiful new restaurant. Polished with tables, golden lighting, soft music settings, luxurious menus. Mia stared at the images in awe. Claire's voice softened. We want you to be a part of it. Mia's eyes snapped up. Me? She whispered. But I'm just a waitress. No, Claire said firmly. You're the kind of person who stands up for others even when it costs you everything. That's rare. And that's exactly who we want in our team. She took a deep breath. We want to offer you a job here. A real job. With respect. With good pay. With benefits. And with a future. Mia felt her heart stop. She covered her mouth with her hand as tears pushed against her eyes. No one had ever offered her something so big, so life-changing. Her legs felt weak and she almost sat down right where she stood. Shaq stepped closer and held her shoulder. This is what you deserve, he whispered gently. But Claire wasn't finished. She held up one more paper. And one more thing, she said. Shaq told me about your mother's health problems. Mia froze. Claire continued, we want to cover her medical expenses for the next full year. Mia collapsed into tears, silent, shaking tears that came from a place deeper than pain. A place filled with years of struggle, fear, sacrifice, and worry. Claire hurried over to hug her, and Shaq placed a comforting hand on her back. Mia couldn't speak. She couldn't even breathe properly. The kindness felt overwhelming, almost impossible to believe. But even then Shaq looked at her with a soft smile and said, We're not done yet. There's one more thing you need to see. Mia looked up with wet eyes. What more? She whispered shakily. Shaq turned toward the window overlooking the city. Your story reached someone else, he said. Someone powerful. Someone you never expected. At that exact moment the office door opened slowly, and the person who stepped inside made Mia's heart stop completely. The office door opened slowly, and every sound in the room seemed to disappear. Mia lifted her head, still wiping tears from her cheeks. She expected maybe another manager or maybe someone from the media. But when the figure stepped inside, her breath caught in her throat. It was the owner of the entire restaurant chain, a man known across the country for his strict standards, his success, and his ability to transform lives. Business articles wrote about him. Interviews quoted him. People respected him not because of his wealth, but because he built everything with compassion and discipline. His name was Mr. Anderson, and Mia had seen him only on TV before today. He walked toward her with a calm smile, his suit perfectly pressed, his steps steady and strong. Claire straightened up respectfully as he approached. Even Shaq nodded at him with a level of respect Mia had never seen him give anyone else. That alone told her how important this moment was. Mia, Mr. Anderson said warmly, stopping in front of her, I've heard everything. His voice was gentle, not intimidating. Kind, not powerful. Mia stood there frozen, unsure if she should sit, stand, bow, shake his hand. She didn't know the rules of a world like his. But Mr. Anderson made it simple. He reached out and shook her hand like she was someone important. Someone equal. Someone who mattered. I watched the footage of what happened in that diner, he continued. I read the reports. I saw the interviews. And I saw how you handled the situation, with grace, with strength, and with a heart most people never show under pressure. Mia felt her face warm. She lowered her head shyly. I didn't do anything special, she whispered. Yes, Mr. Anderson said, you did. You stood up for someone when there was nothing to gain. And you kept your dignity even when humiliated. He glanced at Shaq with a grateful smile. And when Shaq told me everything, I knew instantly that people like you are exactly who I fight to protect in this industry. Mia blinked in confusion. Protect? She repeated softly. Mr. Anderson nodded. Yes. Hospitality work is hard. Workers are often disrespected, underpaid, and mistreated. But you represent everything good about this profession. And I want to reward that. He opened the folder Claire had been holding earlier and pulled out a new document, one that looked more important than the job offer she had already received. He handed it to her. Her hands shook as she held it. She looked down and read the first line. Her eyes widened. She shook her head in disbelief. This can't be real, she whispered. But it was. The paper wasn't just a job offer. It wasn't just a salary. It was something much bigger. It was a full scholarship, paid completely by Mr. Anderson himself, allowing Mia to attend one of the top hospitality and management schools in the country. The same school he attended when he was young and broke. The same school that changed his life. And now, he was offering the same chance to her. Mia covered her mouth with both hands as tears streamed down her face. "Why?" she cried softly. "Why would you do this for me?" Mr. Anderson smiled gently. "Because kindness deserves a future. Not just praise." Shaq stepped closer and said softly, "And because your mother deserves peace too." Mia cried harder. Claire hugged her tightly. Shaq rested a comforting hand on her back. The whole room felt warm, glowing with the kind of kindness that heals all wounds. After several minutes, when Mia finally managed to stop crying, Mr. Anderson spoke again. "I want you to study, grow, and become someone powerful in this field. And when you do, I want you to use that power to protect workers just like you were yesterday." Mia nodded through tears. "I will. I promise." Mr. Anderson smiled proudly. "I believe you." Later that afternoon, Mia and Shaq walked out of the tall building together. The sun was bright, the air warm, and for the first time in years, Mia felt light, lighter than she ever remembered feeling. She didn't care about the cameras waiting outside. She didn't care about the crowd. Today wasn't about fear anymore. It was about hope, opportunity, and new beginnings. When she stepped out, the crowd erupted into applause. Some people called her name. Others held signs that read, "We support Mia," and "Kindness wins." She covered her heart with her hand, overwhelmed by the love strangers showed her. Shaq leaned over and whispered, "Ready for your new life?" Mia smiled, a real, bright, confident smile she hadn't felt in a long time. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "I'm ready." The cameras captured that moment, her standing tall, her eyes shining, her heart finally free. And the news headline that night read, "Fired waitress receives life-changing gift after helping Big Shaq. A new future begins." And that was true. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't luck. It was the reward for kindness. Coming back stronger than she ever imagined. Across town, Mia stood frozen in front of the television, her eyes wide and her heart racing. She couldn't understand how her private pain had suddenly become a public story. She watched the footage again and again, Big Shaq standing inside the diner, speaking calmly, defending her in front of everyone. The way he talked about her kindness, the way people clapped, the way the news headline carried her name, it all felt unreal. Her mother placed a gentle hand on her back, whispering that everything was going to be okay. But Mia didn't know what to feel. She was shocked, grateful, and overwhelmed all at once. Her phone buzzed nonstop with messages from friends, coworkers, and even strangers. Some wrote that they were inspired by her kindness. Others said they were proud of her. And many begged her to speak to the news. She didn't respond to any of them. She just stared at the screen, trying to understand how her whole life had changed overnight. Meanwhile, Big Shaq had already left the diner. He sat in the back seat of a car, scrolling through his phone. Messages flooded his inbox. Fans, journalists, friends, and even other celebrities asking about the situation. But Shaq wasn't focused on fame or attention. He was focused on one thing, finding Mia. He felt responsible. He felt angry that someone had punished her for doing what was right. And he felt certain that he needed to make things better for her, not tomorrow, not next week, today. He told his driver to head toward the address he had managed to get quietly from one of the fired employees who had reached out earlier. The man had explained everything, how Mia was hardworking, how she supported her sick mother, how the manager always treated her unfairly. Shaq listened patiently, feeling even more determined to help her. Kind people like her deserved better, and he wasn't going to let her disappear in silence. Not when the whole world was watching. Back in her little home, Mia's phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a friend. It was an unknown number. She hesitated. Her hands shook slightly as she picked it up. When she answered, she heard a calm, familiar voice. "Mia?" the voice asked gently. She froze. She recognized it immediately. It was Big Shaq. She couldn't speak. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Shaq continued softly, "I'm outside your home. I want to talk to you. Only if you're comfortable." Mia rushed to the window and pulled back the curtain. Her breath caught in her throat. Outside, parked quietly on the street, was a black SUV. And standing beside it was Big Shaq himself, looking up at her window with a kind, reassuring smile. Her mother gasped softly beside her. "Go, sweetheart," she whispered. "He stood up for you. Now let him speak to you." Mia nodded slowly. She grabbed a jacket, wiped her face, and stepped outside. Her legs felt weak with every step she took toward him. She had never met a celebrity before, not up close, not like this. And certainly not one who had defended her in front of the world. Shaq greeted her with a warm smile. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he said. "You didn't deserve any of it." His voice was gentle, steady, and sincere. Mia lowered her head, embarrassed that someone like him knew her struggles. "I didn't expect all of this," she whispered. "I just did what felt right." Shaq nodded. "Exactly. You did what was right. And that's why I'm here." Before Mia could ask anything, she heard a sudden noise behind Shaq's car. She turned to see a small group of people walking toward them. They held cameras, microphones, and phones. Reporters. The news had followed him. The sight made her panic. She backed up slightly, her heart racing again, but Shaq immediately stepped in front of her protectively. "Please," he told the reporters, "give her space. She's been through enough." His voice was calm but firm. The reporters respected his words and stayed several steps back. Shaq then turned back to Mia. "Let's talk somewhere quieter," he suggested. She nodded nervously, and he guided her toward a small bench under a tree near her home. Her mother watched from the window, relieved that her daughter wasn't facing this alone anymore. Shaq sat beside Mia and explained everything. The video, the trending hashtag, the crowds at the diner, the messages he received. Mia listened in disbelief, unsure how something so small grew so big. But then Shaq said something that left her speechless. He told her he wanted to help her not just because of what happened, but because the world needed more people like her. He explained that many employees, customers, and strangers online had praised her courage. He told her that she had inspired thousands of people without even trying. And then he said, "I don't want this to be the end of your story. I want it to be the beginning." Mia looked at him with wide eyes, unsure what he meant. But before she could ask, another wave of cameras appeared at the end of the street. More reporters. More attention. People were running toward her neighborhood now, eager to see what would happen next. Shaq stood up slowly, offering his hand to help her stand. "It's time," he said gently. "The world wants to hear from you. And I'll be right beside you." But Mia wasn't ready. Her life had turned upside down in less than 24 hours. She felt scared, emotional, and unprepared for the spotlight. Her hands trembled as she stared at the approaching crowd. Shaq noticed her fear and whispered, "You don't have to face this alone. I'll protect you." Before she could speak, a sudden voice from behind said something that made her freeze. A voice she recognized instantly. "Where is she? I need to speak with her." The crowd parted slowly. And someone unexpected stepped into view.